There was a man who never lost a battle. He was so strong he could tear apart a lion with his bare hands. He even defeated entire armies alone. No chain could hold him. No weapon could harm him. But there was one thing this man could not defeat. The Philistines tried everything: ambushes, traps, thousands of soldiers. They all failed. Yet one woman, armed with nothing but a question, "Do you really love me?" brought him to his knees. How? What secret could destroy the most powerful man on earth? And why would he reveal it, knowing it would cost him everything? This is the story of Samson, a man who could defeat 1,000 enemies but couldn't defeat himself. A story that begins with a miraculous promise from heaven and ends in chains, darkness, and one final desperate prayer that would shake the foundations of an empire. Long ago, in the land of Israel, God's people were suffering. For 40 years they had lived under the rule of the Philistines, a powerful enemy who oppressed them and made their lives difficult. The Israelites cried out to God for help, and God heard their prayers. In a small village, there lived a man named Manoah and his wife. They were good people who loved God, but they had one sadness in their hearts: they had no children. In those days, having children was considered a great blessing, and they longed for a son. One ordinary day, something extraordinary happened. Manoah's wife was alone in the field when suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared before her. She must have been terrified at first, but the angel's message was not one of fear, it was one of hope. "You are going to have a son," the angel said with a gentle authority. "But this will not be an ordinary child. He will be special from the moment he is born." The woman's heart must have raced with excitement and wonder. A son, after all these years of waiting. But the angel continued with specific instructions. "While you are carrying this child, you must not drink wine or any strong drink, and you must not eat anything unclean. And most importantly, no razor must ever touch his head. From birth he will be set apart for God, a Nazirite, and this boy will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines." The woman ran home as fast as she could to tell her husband. "Manoah," she exclaimed, barely able to catch her breath, "a man of God came to me. He looked like an angel. His appearance was awesome and frightening. He told me we're going to have a son." Manoah listened to every word his wife said. Then he prayed earnestly, "Lord, please let the man of God come back to us again and teach us what we should do for this boy who will be born." God heard Manoah's prayer. The angel appeared again. She quickly ran to get her husband, and together they listened as the angel repeated the instructions about their son's special calling. Manoah, not yet fully realizing he was speaking with an angel of the Lord, wanted to show hospitality to this holy messenger. So he said to the angel, "We would like you to stay until we prepare a young goat for you to eat." But the angel replied, "Even if I stay, I will not eat any of your food. However, if you want to prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." Manoah still didn't realize he was speaking with an angel of the Lord. Then Manoah asked, "What is your name, so that we may honor you when your words come true?" The angel answered with words full of mystery, "Why do you ask my name? It is beyond understanding." Some translations say his name was Wonderful, or Too Wonderful to Comprehend, a name that belonged to God alone. Then Manoah took a young goat and a grain offering and sacrificed them on a rock to the Lord. And as Manoah and his wife watched, something amazing happened. As the flames from the altar went up towards heaven, the angel of the Lord ascended in the fire. Manoah and his wife fell face down on the ground in awe and worship, finally understanding they had been in the presence of God's messenger. "We have seen God," Manoah cried out in fear. "We will surely die." But his wife, wiser in that moment, reassured him. If the Lord wanted to kill us, he wouldn't have accepted our offering. He wouldn't have shown us all these wonderful things or told us about our son. And so, just as the angel promised, the woman gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Samson. The Bible tells us that as Samson grew up, the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within him. This child was destined for greatness, but also for great struggles.
As Samson grew into a young man, his strength became legendary. But it wasn't just any strength, it was a supernatural gift from God, connected to his Nazirite vow and his uncut hair. One day, Samson traveled to the Philistine town of Timnah, where he saw a young Philistine woman who caught his eye. He came home and told his parents, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Get her for me as my wife." His parents were troubled by this. "Isn't there a suitable woman among our own people?" they asked. "Why must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson insisted, "Get her for me. She's the one I want." What his parents didn't know was that God was using even this situation to work against the Philistines. As Samson traveled back to Timnah with his parents, a young lion suddenly roared and attacked him on the path. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as easily as someone might tear a young goat. He didn't even have a weapon. But Samson didn't tell his parents what had happened. Sometime later, when Samson returned to marry the woman, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. To his surprise, bees had made honey inside the dead lion's body. Samson scooped out the honey with his hands and ate it as he walked, sharing some with his parents, though he didn't tell them where it came from. At his wedding feast, which lasted 7 days, as was the custom, Samson challenged 30 Philistine men with a riddle. "Let me tell you a riddle," he said. "If you can solve it during these 7 days, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't solve it, you must give me the same." "Tell us your riddle," they agreed. Samson said, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." For 3 days the Philistine men struggled with the riddle, unable to solve it. On the 4th day they approached Samson's new wife. "Coax your husband to explain the riddle to us," they threatened, "or we'll burn you and your father's household to death." Samson's wife went to him crying, "You hate me. You don't really love me," she sobbed. "You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother," Samson replied. "Why should I explain it to you?" But she cried for the rest of the 7 days of the feast, nagging him constantly. Finally, on the 7th day, worn down by her persistence, Samson told her the answer, and she immediately told it to her people. Just before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town came to Samson with the answer. "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson knew immediately what had happened. "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle," he said angrily. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. He went down to the city of Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, took their belongings, and gave the clothes to those who had solved the riddle. Then, burning with anger, he went back to his father's house, leaving his wife behind. But while Samson was gone, something terrible happened. His father-in-law gave Samson's wife to the companion who had attended him at the wedding, the very friend Samson had trusted. Sometime later, during the wheat harvest, Samson's anger had cooled. He decided to visit his wife, bringing a young goat as a gift to make peace. "I'm going to my wife's room," he told his father-in-law. But his father-in-law wouldn't let him go in. "I was so sure you hated her that I gave her to your companion. Isn't there a younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Samson was furious. This was a deep betrayal. "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines," he declared. "I will really harm them." And that's exactly what he did. Samson went out and caught 300 foxes. Imagine the effort that took. He tied them tail to tail in pairs, fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and released the foxes into the standing grain fields of the Philistines. The frightened animals ran everywhere, spreading fire throughout the fields. The flames consumed not only the grain that was standing in the fields, but also the grain that had been cut and stacked in bundles. Even the vineyards and olive groves were burned. The Philistines' entire harvest was destroyed. When they asked, "Who did this?" they were told, "Samson, because his father-in-law gave his wife to his companion." The Philistines were enraged, but instead of going after Samson, they took their revenge on those they blamed for the problem. They went up and burned Samson's wife and her father to death with fire. When Samson heard what they had done, he was devastated and furious. "Since you've acted like this," he swore, "I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously, striking them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. The casualties were enormous. After this fierce battle, Samson went to stay in a cave at the top of a rock called Edom, seeking refuge from the chaos he had caused. But the Philistines weren't finished. They came up in force and made camp in Judah, spreading out near a place called Lehi. This put the men of Judah in a difficult position. They were caught between Samson and the Philistines. The men of Judah asked the Philistines, "Why have you come up against us?" The Philistines replied, "We have come to take Samson prisoner and to do to him as he did to us." So 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave at the rock of Edom. They said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" Samson answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." The men of Judah said, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Samson made them promise one thing, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." "We agree," they answered. "We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We won't kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock, bringing him to the Philistines. As Samson approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him, shouting in triumph. They thought they had finally captured their enemy. But suddenly, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson. The ropes on his arms became like flax that had been burned with fire. They simply melted away from his hands. Samson looked around quickly for a weapon. There on the ground was the fresh jawbone of a donkey. He reached down, grabbed it, and with this unlikely weapon, he struck down 1,000 men. Can you imagine? 1,000 trained warriors defeated by one man with nothing but a donkey's jawbone. After the battle, Samson made up a victory song. "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." He called that place Ramath Lehi, which means Jawbone Hill. But after such intense fighting, Samson became terribly thirsty. He was exhausted and dehydrated, and he cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" God heard Samson's prayer. The Lord opened up a hollow place in the ground at Lehi, and water came gushing out of it. Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. That's why that spring was called En Hakor, meaning the caller's spring, and it remained in Lehi for many years to come. For 20 years, Samson led Israel as a judge. The Philistines feared him greatly, but they desperately wanted to know the secret of his strength so they could defeat him. Sometime later, Samson went to the Philistine city of Gaza. While there, he saw an immoral woman and went in to spend the night with her. This was another example of Samson making unwise choices and giving in to his desires. The people of Gaza found out that Samson was in their city. "Samson is here," they said excitedly. This was their chance to capture or kill him. They surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They kept quiet, thinking, "At dawn we'll kill him when he tries to leave." But Samson only stayed until midnight. At midnight he got up, took hold of the doors of the city gate, which were massive wooden structures, along with the 2 posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them all the way to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. The people who had planned to trap him woke up to find their city gates gone and Samson nowhere to be found. This was just the beginning of Samson's battles with the Philistines. Time after time, God's Spirit would come upon him and he would perform incredible feats of strength. But Samson had a weakness that would prove to be his downfall. And when he met a woman named Delilah in the valley of Sorek, his enemies finally saw their opportunity. Would Samson's strength be enough to save him from what was coming? Keep watching to find out how Samson's enemies set their most dangerous trap.
The rulers of the Philistines went to Delilah with an offer she couldn't refuse. "See if you can entice him and find out the secret of his great strength," they said. "Find out how we can overpower him so we can tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." That was an enormous amount of money, enough to make someone very wealthy. Delilah agreed to their plan. So Delilah began to work on Samson. "Tell me the secret of your great strength," she said sweetly. "How could someone tie you up and subdue you?" Samson replied, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that haven't been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." The Philistine rulers brought 7 fresh bowstrings to Delilah, and she tied Samson with them. She had men hiding in the room, waiting to capture him. Then she called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" But Samson snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. The secret of his strength remained unknown. Delilah said to Samson, "You've made a fool of me and lied to me. Now tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Again she called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And again he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah was frustrated. She said to Samson, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom, with the fabric still attached. Then Delilah said to him, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me the secret of your great strength." Day after day she nagged him, pressing him until he was tired to death. Finally, Samson could take it no longer. He told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he confessed, "because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." Delilah realized that this time he had told her the truth. She sent word to the Philistine rulers, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." They came, bringing the silver they had promised her. That night, Delilah lulled Samson to sleep on her lap.
She called in a man who shaved off the 7 braids of Samson's hair. Then she began to push him around, and for the first time, his strength left him. "Samson, the Philistines are upon you," she called out again. Samson woke up and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him immediately. They gouged out his eyes, one of the cruelest punishments imaginable. They took him down to Gaza, bound him with bronze shackles, and put him to work grinding grain in the prison like an animal. The mighty Samson, who had killed lions and defeated armies, was now blind, bound, and humiliated. He had broken his vow to God, and he had lost everything: his strength, his freedom, his sight, and his purpose. But there was one thing the Philistines didn't notice. Slowly, day by day, as Samson worked in that dark prison, his hair began to grow back.
Months passed. The Philistine rulers decided to hold a great celebration to honor their god Dagon. "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands," they celebrated. Thousands of people gathered in the temple, the rulers, all the people, and about 3,000 men and women on the roof watching the festivities. In their drunken joy, someone shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us!" So they brought Samson from the prison. The once mighty hero, now blind and weak, was led by a servant boy into the temple. They made fun of him, laughing at the man who had once terrified them. They performed various humiliations, treating him like a circus animal. After being displayed for their entertainment, Samson said to the servant boy who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." The boy led him to the 2 central pillars that held up the entire structure. Samson reached out, placing his right hand on one pillar and his left hand on the other. Then Samson prayed. It had been so long since he had truly called out to God with a sincere heart. "Sovereign Lord," he prayed, "remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more. Let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." In that moment, Samson wasn't just seeking revenge. He was asking God for one more chance to fulfill his calling, to deliver Israel from their oppressors. Then Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." He pushed with all his might against the 2 central pillars. The temple shook, people screamed, and then with a tremendous crash, the entire building came down, killing Samson along with all the Philistine rulers and all the people who were inside. The Bible tells us that Samson killed more people in his death than he had killed during his entire life. It was a tragic end, but also a victorious one. Through his final act, Samson had dealt a crushing blow to Israel's enemies. Samson's brothers and his father's whole family came and took his body. They brought him back home and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. His story was over, but the lessons from his life would echo through the generations. Samson's story teaches us powerful truths that still matter today. First, God can use anyone for great purposes. Samson was set apart from birth for a special mission. Each of us has a calling too, something God wants us to do with our lives. We might not have supernatural strength, but God gives us unique gifts and abilities to serve Him and help others. Second, our greatest strength can become our greatest weakness if we're not careful. Samson's physical power was incredible, but he was weak when it came to controlling his desires and making wise choices. He often acted impulsively, letting his emotions guide him instead of God's wisdom. Real strength isn't just physical, it's having self-control, wisdom, and faithfulness. Third, breaking our promises to God has consequences. Samson's strength came from his Nazirite vow, his covenant with God. When he allowed his hair to be cut, he was breaking that sacred promise. When we turn away from God or ignore His guidance in our lives, we lose the spiritual strength He provides. We might not lose physical abilities, but we lose our peace, our direction, and our effectiveness in living out God's purpose for us. Fourth, small compromises lead to big failures. Samson didn't lose everything all at once. He made small choices, marrying outside his faith, telling lies, spending time with the wrong people, and each choice took him further from God's plan. If he had stayed faithful in the small things, he might never have fallen so far. But finally, and perhaps most importantly, God offers grace even when we fail. In Samson's darkest moment, blind and imprisoned, he prayed once more, and God answered. God gave him strength for one final mission. This reminds us that it's never too late to turn back to God. Even when we've made terrible mistakes, even when we've wasted our gifts, God still listens when we pray with a sincere heart. Samson's life could have been so much more if he had stayed faithful to his calling from the beginning. But even with all his mistakes, God still used him to begin delivering Israel from the Philistines. How much more could God do through us if we chose faithfulness every day? The question for each of us is, what gifts has God given you? How are you using them? Are you staying faithful to God's calling on your life, or are you making compromises that could lead you away from His best plans for you? Samson's story reminds us that true strength doesn't come from muscles or power. It comes from staying close to God and keeping the promises we make to Him.
Thank you so much for watching. If this story encouraged you or taught you something new, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more amazing Bible stories. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next adventure through Scripture. Share this video with your friends and family. Everyone needs to hear these timeless truths. What lesson from Samson's life spoke to you the most? Let me know in the comments below. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next story.